Hello everyone, and I welcome all of you again to this course titled as British Poetry. Friends, we were discussing W.B. Yeats's poem The Second Coming, and in the last class we talked about the concept of spiritus mundi. Now, in today's class, this 30 minutes lecture, we are going to learn about a new concept. Most of the people who had researched upon W.B. Yeats, they know about this concept. This is known as the concept of Gyres, Gyres. This is not a concept which is created by W.B. Yeats. Rather, his Christianity, his, let's say, mythological knowledge has motivated him to, let's say, use this concept of Gyre in reference to the societal reflection which he wished to share through this poem, The Second Coming. But before coming to the main points, let me tell you what will be the lecture outcome. What are you going to learn after this 30 minutes lecture? You would be able to evaluate Yeats's concept of Gyres in reference to his Christian beliefs. So, this is, friends, a kind of, let's say, autobiographical concept. What kind of person Yeats was? What were the beliefs of W.B. Yeats? That is something which is very essential to understand the way he has written his poetry. So, without, let's say, wasting any time, let us now start discussion on Yeats's concept of Gyres. A gyre in The Second Coming is a kind of twisting, turning cone shape that Yeats used as a virtual representation of historical epochs. So friends, this is a concept which is related to historicization of literature. Mark my words, I am saying that historicization of literature. So there is a cone shape, let's say, concept which is trying to be applied into literature by W.B. Yeats in this poem. Yeats believed that the current Gyre, the one that had been in existence since the birth of Christ, was coming to an end and would be replaced by a new historical epoch characterized by bloodshed, chaos, and disorder. And friends, this is aptly, let's say, applicable to the time of Yeats because he had seen World War I. So we can say that the bloodshed, chaos, and disorder had made the people understand that there is, let's say, no hope left in the future of humanity. And that came true when the Second World War happened after 35 or 40 years of the First World War. And then still in the 21st century, we are living in 2021, and there are still, let's say, the conditions where again World War III can happen in the world. So when Yeats believed in the concept of, let's say, Gyre, that is something which is related to the birth of Christ and the coming to an end. And that is right. If any world war happens, the world may come to an end. And after, let's say, the world may come to an end, the requirement of God or the Son of God is most essential, as mentioned in the, let's say, religious books of Christianity. The historical epochs which are characterized by bloodshed, chaos, and disorder are, let's say, aptly mentioned by W.B. Yeats in his poems. In the run up to the millennium, the 2000th anniversary of the birth of Christ, many people began to consider the possibilities of this second coming more. So friends, this is also important because it's almost 2000 years of the, let's say, birth of Christ, and now the people are expecting the second coming. The people who are religious related to Christianity, they believe in Jesus Christ and the rebirth of Christ as mentioned in the religious books. The gyre metaphor Yeats employs in the first line, denoting circular motion and repetition, is a nod to Yeats's mystical belief that history repeats itself in cycles. So, friends, the gyre is a kind of, let's say, conical shape figure, suggest that the history is going to repeat itself. In the cycle, the, let's say, situations are going to repeat themselves. But the gyre is widening. It is getting further and further away from its center. Like I told you, that the gyre is of a conical shape and it has, let's say, a center point at the bottom, and then it moves upside and then the shape widens. So in this way, and it is, as soon as it is rising upside, it is moving apart away from the center point from where this started. So, its point of origin. In short, it's losing control and the center cannot hold. That's what Yeats says in this poem, that the center is not going to hold the control on the, let's say, last point of this gyre. So, the things are going away from the, let's say, from the hands of the human beings. There is too much violence in the world. But what sort of second coming will it be? It's almost been 20 centuries or 2000 years since Christ came to earth in human form and was crucified. What rough beast will reveal itself this time? So, W.B. Yeats is confused that how the rough beast is going to represent itself in the present scenario. So, when the Christ is going to come on earth and will take the human form and may be crucified again, what will be the situation of the world in that condition? Perhaps it will not be a Christ in human form, but something although different. The reference to Spiritus Mundi, literally spirit of the world, is like the gyre, another allusion to Yeats's beliefs. So, friends, we can see that when the Christ is going to come in the human form in the world, that will be altogether different situation like it used to, let's say, happen 2000 years before, and which is why Yeats used the concept of spiritus mundi, which is related to the spirit of the world. What is the spirit of the world in the present century? The spirit of the world is suggesting destruction, and just like a gyre which, let's say, destructs itself, the destruction lies in its origin. In the same way, Yeats believes in this concept of gyre and spiritus mundi in reference to the situation of the present world. For Yeats, the spiritus mundi was a sort of collective soul containing all of mankind's cultural memories, not just Christian memories, but those from, let's say, other societies. So, friends, Yeats is not only concerned about the Christian society, but he is also talking about the other societies. And we had seen it that in the entire world, the different communities of Africa, India, Asia, there are situations which suggest a kind of chaos and bloodshed. A shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun. These are the lines quoted from the poem itself, where Yeats is talking about the shape of a lion body and the head of a man, which we can see in the pyramids. And then there is a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, that is reflected in the image of this, let's say, different kind of creature. It suggests something altogether different from Jesus Christ. It's got more in common with the Sphinx, that giant stone sculpture of the human cat hybrid found near the pyramids at Giza. So, friends, Yeats is trying to give a universal approach to his ideas. He says that the pyramids of Giza, they had this kind of image, which Yeats is calling here as a, let's say, loin shaped body of a human being. So, this is something which is, let's say, mythical according to Yeats's ideas. Yeats's word gaze even faintly suggests Giza. So gaze, we can also relate this word to Giza, which belongs to a different civilization from the Christian one and indeed predated it. The, let's say, another concept which Yeats wished to talk into this concept, let us talk about it, that is the widening gyre. So the gyre always it widens at the top and it has a center point at the bottom. So this is symbolic in reference to the message which Yeats wished to give through this poem. Gyre is actually a scientific term used to refer to a vortex located over the air or sea, and it usually refers to systems of circulating ocean currents. In Yeats's The Second Coming, Gyre is used to represent the swirling, turning landscape of life itself. Gyres appear in many of Yeats's poems. He uses it to represent the system that make up life, the push-pull between freedom and control, and that is spin together to create existence. So friends, with the concept of Gyre, Yeats wished to personify the cycle of human life. Yeats says that in the, let's say, society, we see that there is always a push-pull war going on between freedom and control. People want freedom, government control the human lives. So in the same way, the existence is questionable in the present society, and what will be the relevance of the existence in this human society for individuals is something which Yeats wish to, let's say, communicate through this concept of Gyre. On the other hand, this is also a kind of, let's say, scientific term, because Gyre is always found above, let's say, the sea or in the air. So this is something which is, let's say, a part of nature, and as human beings are also a part of nature, so Gyre is directly related to their life. The poem opens with a mysterious metaphor. A falconer searches for his lost falcon within a widening gyre. So, we see that there is a mysterious metaphor used in the poem. That mysterious metaphor is of a falconer and a falcon, and where Yeats says that the falconer is searching for his lost falcon. So, they are departed from each other. The falconer and the falcon, they are departed from each other, because the gyre is widening and there is a push pull going on between the, let's say, under, let's say, the surface of gyre. The bird itself can't hear the falconer, perhaps because of the way that the surroundings are widening. And as we know that the shape of gyre widens quickly, so there is so much distance between the bird and the falconer that they are unable to hear each other. They have lost their connection with each other. Here, it's important to know a little bit about Yeats' system of seeing the world, outlined in his book, A Vision. So, friends, Yeats has written a very famous book, A Vision, where he talks about this concept, this system of, let's say, the gyre, his mythological knowledge. He conceives of history as a kind of movement of gyres, which are shapes like cone spirals or vortexes. According to Yeats, each phase of history is in contrast motion against the next, in a dimension that is essentially beyond the limits of human understanding. So, we see that beyond the human understanding, this concept of gyre is changing the human life. There is a constant motion which is given through this gyre. The poem conceives of the 20th century as the point when one gyre of history, the 20 centuries of Christianity, and the progress gives way to another. So we see that the center of this gyre is the birth of Jesus Christ. And in this 2000 years duration, there are so much, let's say, points are so much wide apart that Christianity, that human, let's say, civilization is losing its strength, and Christianity is losing its control over the, let's say, last point of this gyre. This new era is altogether harder to define, but it looks ominous. The image of the falconer, the human, losing control over his environment, represented by the falcon, symbolize this shift from one phase of history to the next. So we see that history is changing its phase, but it is repeating itself just like a gyre. Both opening lines use close repetition of words to create a sense of disorientation as the falcon turns repeatedly in search of its master. So, just like a falcon is turning back to look at its master, the falconer, in the same way, history is also looking at its back. What are the problems in the historical incidents and whether we have learned from those incidents or not? The dicope of turning and the polyptoton of falcon and falconer suggest repeated and increasingly desperate movements. So, this is a kind of desperate movement. The situation is very critical. Nobody knows where it is going to lead the humanity. The heavy na consonance contributes to this effect. So, Yeats was, let's say, a very musical kind of poet. So he has used music also symbolically, the consonant sound which is visible in the coming lines, to discuss the concept of gyre. And I quote these lines from the poem where Yeats says, "Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer." So, na sound which is visible here suggests the seriousness of this situation. The speaker's tone is notably measured and detached in the opening, suggesting little of the nightmarish vision to come in the second stanza. So, there is a kind of nightmare kind of situation which is explained by Yeats in the coming lines. That said, the poem has now introduced its central premises of the loss of control. And though the poem's meaning is ambiguous, it seems like this loss of control is humanity over its civilization. We can simply, let's say, understand, friends, through this poem that humanity and civilization, they are not related to each other now. This civilization, the current civilization, has no humanity left in themselves. So they cannot call themselves proud human beings. They have lost all kind of human values, and which is explained by Yeats in the coming lines. And I quote these lines from the poem where Yeats says that things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. So there is anarchy everywhere. The people are spoiling their lives under the pressure of the petty, let's say, gains. The gyre is the foremost among symbols Yeats developed to explicate his idea of history. It is an expanding spiral extending out like a cone with time representing one dimension. So, Yeats is trying to capture a dimension of a time, suggesting that in this dimension the situation is very critical. Once a gyre reaches its maximum extent, it begins to narrow while its opposite tendency expand. So, when it will reach to its let's say top, the world is going to end because the gyre is going to fall down in that situation. There is a tendency in the gyre to expand and then to ruin itself in that situation. The gyre in the second coming is a spiral of ever greater disorder, which creates in people's heart the longing for the Savior who will bring structure back to the world. So, every one of us believe that the world has lost its structure, and we are seeking for the reincarnation of the God again on earth in this kind of, let's say, critical situation of anarchy. And this is explained by Yeats in these lines from the poem. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. So Yeats wish to say that God is going to come and will, let's say, stop this anarchy, spread it in the world. The trajectory of the 2010 parallel that of the second coming. The decade began with the Arab Spring and Occupy movements, which were decentralized, leaderless agitations against aristocrats and oligarchies. Friends, we had seen in the African countries that there is a civil war going on against the monarchs. And these are, let's say, leaderless kind of, let's say, movements going on, suggesting the agitation which people had from the traditional pattern of aristocracy. The falcons flew in widening gyres beyond the control of falconers. In places like Libya, Yemen, and Syria, though they spun out of control. So, friends, we can see that the falconer is taking different speed in different countries. And when we look at the situation of the disturbed countries like Libya, Yemen, and Syria, we see that this, let's say, this situation is out of control. The gyre in those countries is out of control and it is going to fall down anytime. The total breakdown of order or unending civil wars indicated the failure of the center to hold, in the words of the second coming. And then I quote it from the poem: "The blood dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned." Poet is saying that everywhere we have the bloodshed, and the innocence is somewhere lost in this situation. So it is going to lose itself. The ceremony which people used to enjoy in the world of innocence, it has lost somewhere in the, let's say, petty gains which people wish to do in the present situation. Yeats conceptualized history as a series of interpenetrating gyres. So, interpenetrating, the gyres are mingling with each other according to the critical situation of different countries of the world. Historical eras overlap, one ending at the next one begins. So, there is a chain of gyres, one is mingled with another one. So, if one ends, the another raises, and the historical eras are overlapping with each other, suggesting that the time constraint has lost between the historical, let's say, historicization of past and the situations which are, let's say, enforcing these kind of conditions. Now, if we look at this slide, you can see that there are two, let's say, cones which are mixed with each other, and there are two center corners of the gyres. And then the, let's say, the last point or the top point where the spread is too much, we can see that they are again going to fall down when from the chains of gyres they will meet each other and they will destruct each other. They are, let's say, threat to each other's life. So in this way we can understand that the problems which are, let's say, arising day by day in the different countries, it may lead to the situation of third world war. The countries may be agitated from their problems, and rather than trying to solve positively and try to think positively about their, let's say, problems, they will think of attacking other countries and trying to find solution in the war. And this is the something which may lead to the destruction of the entire world and the beginning of the third world war, which Yeats wished to convey through this poem, The Second Coming. I hope with this concept you have, let's say, closely understood the Yeats's concept of gyres and the philosophy with which he has written this poem, The Second Coming. There are two links which I had given on this slide. So please go to those links. You will get a better insight in this philosophy of gyres and how it is related to the literary works of W.B. Yeats. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.